Why is it so significant to find new mechanisms of delivery? Because that is a successful loophole in patent extension. What about the argument I hear that the U.S. prices subsidize cheaper prices in other countries? It is not correct. You want to know why that's incorrect? I don't know if you knew this, but a lot of medication and the distribution patents given to specific medication is actually not held by the same companies on the global marketplace. For example, some companies will hold the patent for a specific pharmaceutical in NA, which includes the United States of America and Canada, versus the rest of the world, and I believe Japan as well. So companies actually see the American marketplace as a totally separate marketplace. Therefore, there is no subsidization happening. Because if the American market was actually subsidizing the rest of the world, which by the way is ridiculous anyway, why the fuck would we do that? That would be ridiculous. The EU and the rest of the global marketplace patents would have to also be held by the same company. That also is something that you must consider. Even though most drugs have separate distribution, separate companies that own the rights to distribution in different marketplaces. So one company will maintain the ownership of the NA marketplace and Japan, whereas another company will own the global distribution. So if there was any sort of like price subsidization occurring, then the same patent would have to be owned by the same company globally. It is also anti-capitalist to make this assumption. There is no way that you engage in this kind of subsidy across the board. You would just simply refuse to sell to the cheaper market. If there was no profit to be made in the cheaper market, you would just not sell there. That's it. It's that simple. Because at the end of the day, that's just how capitalism works. If you can turn a profit, you go and you sell the product there. You go and you sell the commodity there. There is no gun to your head that forces you to sell drugs in a marketplace that does not have enough money for you to turn profit. As a matter of fact, in many countries with socialized healthcare structures, there are certain drugs that are not available for this very specific reason. Unless there's a loss leader or regulatory reasons or whatever, but in general, yes. No, but there is no gun being pointed at the head of like Merck or whatever. Unless you are trying to, yes, become a loss leader and engage in like predatory pricing in order to drive out the rest of the competition of the marketplace, which in pharmaceuticals is like already maintained through patents anyway. What do you mean? What isn't available? There are many countries where certain brand pharmaceuticals are not immediately available. Certain drugs are just not available. I don't think that's what the chatter was trying to say. He was saying subsidizing like they're extracting. No. The subsidization argument is a very specific argument created by the American Enterprise Institute as a talking point that the likes of Ben Shapiro repeat regularly. So no, I don't think that chatter was saying that. That their chatter was saying they're extracting more from the American population to increase profits overall in the rest of the countries with socialized healthcare. They have a normal profit margin. The rest of the countries have ridiculous margins in the U.S. No. The argument of subsidizing is the same exact dumbass argument the reactionary right-wing conservatives engage in when talking about the American military. We have the military that we have because we protect the rest of the world. So all those other countries have the capacity to spend on themselves. But we are so magnanimous that we are spending all that money that we could be spending on ourselves, like our healthcare, our infrastructure, our education system, all of which is crippled on our military. Those other countries do not have their own standing military and they don't need to spend that much money on their own defense because we are doing it for them, is the argument that, ironically, America First conservatives make on a regular basis, which of course isn't America First, it's America Last. It also fundamentally misunderstands why NATO exists. NATO doesn't exist because we are defending the rest of the world. NATO exists so we can command the rest of the world. NATO exists as a protection racket for this reason. But that argument isn't about the profit once made. It's that the profit incentive in the U.S. justifies the cost of clinical trials and whatnot that develop the drug. That argument is also false. Profit incentives do not actually boost novel chemical compound discovery. As a matter of fact, the United States, in totality, being as large as it is and being as wealthy as it is, of course, still is leading the world in novel chemical compound discovery. However, if you look at and adjust per capita and look at the amount of money spent on novel chemical compound discovery versus how much novel chemical compounds are being discovered, the United States is not, I think it's in the top 10 still, but it is not at the top. I forget which country was like number one. I think it might be like Switzerland potentially. Also, most of, if not damn near all of the novel chemical compound discovery occurs at publicly funded research level. Companies will then go to these publicly funded research facilities that then will turn around and purchase the patent, sit on the patent, and then spend a shit ton of their money on both marketing, which should be illegal, by the way. Beyond the marketing, spend it on research and development, right? And you immediately will probably think, well, research and development, see, Hasan, they're doing research and development. The reality of that research and development is that a big chunk of that R&D, it varies from company to company, but a big chunk of that R&D actually is finding new ways of delivering the same exact drug for the same exact reasons, for the same exact cure, for the same exact issues. Why is it so significant to find new mechanisms of delivery? Because that is a successful loophole in patent extension. These companies will say, we are sitting on this patent. We are going to max out on this patent. We're going to try to maximize the profits that we can get out of this patent that we now own. And the most reliable way to do that is by trying to find different mechanisms of delivery of the drug. That is where a lot of the R&D goes to. Novo Nordisk canceled Levemir insulin and will likely repatent it with another name. This is how companies engage in a practice called patent maxing. It's, we just made that up in this community. Patent maxing is not a real term, but that is basically what they're doing. I guess the professional term for it is called evergreening. They minimally change the drug or delivery mechanism and renew the patents. Profit incentives genuinely stifle innovation in the medical sector quite frequently, as a matter of fact. If you want to know how, pharmaceutical corporations, if they're at the precipice of a patent no longer being able to be extended, will refuse to do additional pharmaceutical trials that might have different uses for the same medication. They stop those pharmaceutical trials because they recognize that they no longer can max out on the profit because a generic alternative is going to be readily available at the end of that patent. Our drug company made $114 billion by gaming the U.S. patent system. AbbVie, for years, delayed competition for its blockbuster drug Humira at the expense of patients and taxpayers. The monopoly is about to end. That is something that people need to take into account. As a matter of fact, the profit incentive does not work at the behest of innovation, but oftentimes will work against innovation. Doesn't the reverse of this kind of work against pharmaceutical companies kind of work? It's not exactly the same, but like Kirtland brand stuff will often go to the same exact manufacturers, Advil for the sake of example, and make the same exact thing, but sell it cheaper and call it Kirtland brand instead. Does this kind of work in fighting against it? What you are describing is the process of generics. Once the patent is off the market, once the patent can no longer be maintained by a company, generics come into play. And when generics come into play, the company will either stop completely distributing it, or I guess if they can still make money off of it, they greatly lower the price in order to compete against the generic. However, due to the patent loophole seeking process that we just talked about called evergreening, this practice takes many decades. And as you know, when you are ill and you need medication, you do not have decades sometimes. That is why medicine is something with inelastic demand, as in, no matter what the supply looks like, people will need it, because if you don't take it, you die.
They'll say, well, we used to have 3 pills and we'll make it into 1, or we will change the coating of the drug to get fast extended release. Now, people might say, well, something innovative in terms of putting 3 pills into 1. It never existed before for a particular product. That's inventive, that's innovative. Now, for the purpose of the patent system, I don't think you should get 20 years for that. I think, yes, your investment should be rewarded, that's fine.
No, f that.
That, for me, is an incremental iteration of existing science.
No, f that. No. I think all of this should be completely devoid of the profit incentive. I think a lot of people misunderstand the reasons as to why. Our brains are so permanently warped by capitalist way of thinking that we think like the only reason why people do shit is so that they can make money. And I think that's ridiculous. And historically, it's untrue. It's ahistoric to assume that. So many of the game-changing innovations in medicine that we take for granted now in modern medicine came from fucking researchers, and still to this day it comes from researchers, obviously publicly funded research, but like so many of that came from researchers that had massive breakthroughs that specifically never intended on generating a shit ton of profit off of this shit. It's ironic because a lot of times it's not the fucking researchers that are like saying, I'm doing this for the money, big dog, give me the money. It's always like a fucking salaryman working as an accountant that's making that assumption. It's never the researchers that are like, no, I'm doing this specifically for the money. Yeah, innovation is an inherently bad investment. That's why high-risk novel research is done in publicly funded research labs and not by big pharma. The capitalism drives innovation lovers are always wrong. Yup.